Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. To everybody who's joined the webinar, I'd like to thank you for joining, as would Blaine. I'm Darren Bain from Crowd, one of the founders at Crowd from 21 years ago. Seems like a long time now. But we want to talk about how with Alcatraz, we're really providing a new paradigm out in the access control world. So that's my background. Let's hand over to Blaine to introduce himself as well. Blaine?
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, pleasure being here. Appreciate the invite. Blaine Frederick. I lead solution engineering here at Alcatraz. We, of course, do face authentication. My background is in physical security, as you would imagine, for the last 25 years, which also seems like a long time. And really excited to talk a little bit more about kind of how our two companies are working together.
Thanks, Blaine. So the topic of today's webinar and why you've all joined is access control at a crossroads. We've presented this to other people as well. It's really access perfected is another term we're using for it as well, because, and Blaine and I both lamented that we used to be the young bucks in this industry, and we're now the kind of middle-aged bucks in this industry. We've been here in the 20-year time frame. And in full disclosure, Blaine and I, we've known each other for a long, long time across all of those years. And it's very gratifying and also pretty exciting that Blaine went off and did the Alcatraz, and we've been doing Right Crowd, and now it's all just come together. And it's not just Blaine and I, but just the two technologies and the way that the market's gone, and what customers really need in the world, and that's what we're going to talk about today, to have the types of security solutions that they really desire and need for compliance reasons, how we're bringing that together. So for Blaine and I, this is actually, as two old mates in the industry, we're pretty excited to present this together. So here we go. From a Right Crowd perspective, and I'm going to lament a little bit more as well, we've been doing this 21 years, and really we're in the physical identity access management space. And that's not a term we invented. It's just a thing that built itself around the product and the market that we ended up in. But that whole PIAM or PM market is really all about taking identity data and then managing physical access and compliance and safety and integration into physical security and all of the checks and balances and audits and terminations around the outside. And that's a great story. But you know what? It's not the highest thing on everyone's totem pole. That's sort of the first 15 years. It was pretty hard work selling that. And even in the last 5 or 10 years, it's still, it's super exciting, and more customers. We started with super large customers, and we're gradually, finding our way down through smaller and smaller customers. They're still massive customers, but it's taken a long time for it to really rise up to being a significant recognition in organizations that this automation of physical access is truly a game changer at organizations. But thankfully, thanks to Blaine, we have this glittering object, which is the ROC, the biometric facial authentication that they offer. And I'll let Blaine talk about that. But that really has put a real piece of icing across the top of the cake. And it's really made it more compelling because, as Blaine will attest, that's what people really want, is they want that high security area secured by facial authentication, no way that it could be anyone else, and a fantastic user experience, and that it's easy to enroll, and it's easy to get into the system, and it's easy to then turn up at the secure door and actually, gain access and be audited and be checked and balanced and everything else. So by starting at that as their outcome, they then realize fairly quickly that they need all of that administration behind the scenes. They need that identity source. They need that integration to the physical access control system or systems. And without that glittery object is fantastic, but there's a lot of day-to-day rigmarole that has to go on. That happens anyway, because you've got 50,000 people at an organization, and those 50,000 people all need physical access. And that's a key part of organizing around PIAM. But now we want to do it with the end goal of actually securing these high security areas and making it a seamless user experience from the ROC biometric facial authentication perspective. Blaine, do you want to lean into that a little bit from what we've, the last 6-12 months of it?
Yeah, no, that's a great lead in. And so, yeah, just a little bit more background on Alcatraz. So we do face authentication for physical access control. And as Darren mentioned, we're an edge device. and we're able to authenticate people single factor, multi-factor for high security in real time. Kind of our main tenet is the user experience, a frictionless experience. So we want to make everything about the entire user experience frictionless, and that's from the actual getting through the door to how easy it is to install to how easy it is to administer. And so that's our end goal. We're targeted primarily at the enterprise market, which is again where RightCrowd plays very heavily. So when Darren and I were talking, one of the challenges is as you move this technology into these corporations, getting everybody enrolled is something that needs to be done. And as a company, we have a few different ways you can enroll. We have what we call our manual enrollment, which is basically an enrollment station in a guard officer room, receptions desk, etc. And that's traditional, right? You swipe your badge, pretty simple, just like your iPhone. Move your face around a little bit, and you're enrolled. We're basically attaching your face data to the credential data that you presented your badge. We can do automatic enrollment, which allows people to kind of enroll on the fly. And then lastly, we have web enrollment, which is a fairly new offering for us, where we basically allow a person to use their own device or any device with a front-facing camera to do that enrollment. And much like all those ways, the idea is that you're going to take a credential that's already registered in the access control system, and you're going to associate it with the face data that's captured. And just as a point of clarification, we're platform agnostic in terms of the access control. So we can work with, the Secures, Linnells of the world, Genetec, it doesn't matter. Anybody that does Wiegand or OSDP. But we have to get that credential information merged with the face piece. And so that's where we think RightCrowd really comes in nicely. So they already have the identities and have had the identities forever. So that means they know the people, they have the credential information. And we've done an integration now where basically within the RightCrowd platform, you can trigger that web enrollment. So now administrators don't have to go in and type in information at all. They can just simply click a button inside of RightCrowd where the identity lives. It fires off an email, and then the person can enroll. So it's a complete end-to-end solution without having to have additional management, and you get that frictionless experience at the door.
Yeah, there's lots of points that you raised there, Blaine, which I'll make a comment on a few of them. And one of those three enrollment processes, as I often say to our engineers, okay, add an access level, fine. Okay, now you've got 50,000 people, add it 50,000 times, and you watch them struggle now. Like it's at scale, because we're dealing with enterprise customers. We're talking about 50,000 people or 100 or 1 million people in some cases, where that all has to happen. But then you've got the fact that there's a data center and there's particular rooms that have the rocks on them because they're high security areas, they're government control or, whatever the situation is. And at the end of the day, out of that 50,000 people, maybe 3,000 people should have biometric access. Now, that's an exercise in itself. You've got to find those 3,000 people, and it's not 3,000 static people. There's new people every day. These are enterprises. They're hiring every day. They're firing every day. There's people moving in and out of buildings. It's just like chaos. It's trying to juggle 50 balls in the air or 50,000 balls in the air. And at the end of the day, we will do, like, that's our bread and butter. We know everyone who has access to that particular set of rooms or whatever, and we can know, well, therefore they need to be enrolled. Oh, they're no longer in that room? Okay, we'll take that enrollment away and we'll help Alcatraz keep their data clean. We will, okay, that person's terminated, they've resigned, whatever. We can make sure that gets updated. The age-old problem, I've lost my badge. Okay, well, here's a new one. Okay, now I've got to get myself re-enrolled and reassociated in Alcatraz. It's all doable when it's one or twos and things like that. But when there's 50,000 people running around and there's 3,000 that have to be administered, it's a nightmare. And we have these integrations to identity systems, and it's not just Workday or SAP or all the HR systems. It's also contractor management systems. It's also visitor management. We look after every person who's on site, and any of those people might need access to some of those rooms, and we'll make sure that automatically happens. And without automation, you don't have any way of possibly managing these things. So that's really, we're getting to the heart of what we're offering together here is that, you have this great device and this great seamless user experience from the person going through the door, but there's a lot that have to happen to make all of that not only work, but also be compliant when these organizations are being audited thousands of times a year for, physical access, who was here, who was there, why were they there, who approved it. That's what we maintain. And we're augmenting that together you're providing the great seamless and secure access and facial authentication, and we're providing all the administration behind the scenes. And so it's a great symbiosis.
Yep, I agree. And to kind of add on to that, you kind of touched on compliance and regulations and so forth. One of the big things around biometrics is, privacy, data privacy. How do you ensure that, people's identities get protected and so forth? So from an Alcatraz perspective, within our system, like I mentioned, we're looking at just the credential information and then binding that to the face information. And so, this is a real benefit because with RightCrowd managing the identity, they have, some of the PII, but in a completely separate system, we have the face information tied to that credential, but they're separate, right? So having that segregation of data and having it, on the biometric side be anonymous, but on the administrator side, making it seamless, that really is the best of both worlds so that you can, give people that level of compliance. And, you look at a lot of the different laws and so forth, GDPR in particular, right? The most robust privacy law out there. Having these types of controls in place is really the secret to being able to do that. And one of the things that I think we talked about too is around consent management and making sure that people know how to do that. And we've had some customers that are like, hey, I want to, deploy this system. It's important to us that we have a workflow, which is something obviously you guys do so well, to orchestrate the entire process, right? So it isn't just about pushing the credential, but it's making sure that, the person is, has the right consent. They've gone through the proper training, all of those things before you get to that. And again, that entire thing at scale is what I think is really exciting because it does make the administration easy, and then coupled with the frictionless user experience, it's great.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I'm sure it's a bit of a load off your mind, and you're not wondering about, okay, eventually I've got to tell them they've got to administer these 3,000 people. It's kind of a hidden thing that they need to deal with that isn't obvious at the outset, and they need to know that. The fact that we're coming to the market and talking, and we're obviously deploying with customers already with this solution, that they've got those advantages and they don't need to think about all that. And when their auditors come in and when their privacy chiefs and auditors on that side come in, they're going to be compliant. They're going to meet what they need to meet. And at the end of the day, we'll make sure they have all the access that they should have based on their role, their location, any extra access they've requested, whatever the situation is. And we'll make sure that Alcatraz is in line with that. But to your point, it's a great point, is that we are segregated. The only thing that really joins us is this anonymous badge number. That's the only thing we know about the badge number. And we let you know that because of our PAX integration. So you never have to have someone fat finger the wrong badge to someone's biometric. And that problem's gone. But on the other side, you then have that badge number. So when someone facially authenticates, you can tell the door to open and everything on the physical security side. So there's lots of wins in that whole story. And a point that comes to mind that I just want to get out of my brain before I forget is the PAX integration. And we've been doing that from day one. And it's not something that I recommend to anyone that I mentor that they get into. It's a lot of hard work. And you've done some PAX integrations and it's fantastic. You go, great, we've got Secure 4.0. Yep, happy days. And then they come out with 4.5 and then they come out with a change and the SDK changes. And I don't know, there's just a myriad of issues to deal with. It's our bread and butter. It's something we've wrapped our business around. And so it's something we maintain. But you don't want to have to worry about that, as well as making sure you have the best world-class devices and seamless user experience. We take care of all of that. And as I was talking about, the badge number is something we make available, but we can also deal with all the access and even the events and the other things that are occurring in the background. I'm saying it again, it's a win-win.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think too, like we've talked about a little bit, we're both really focused on the enterprise market. We're Fortune 1000 type companies, and so we see this as a great synergy just simply because we're going after the same customers. We have a lot of shared customers already, and so this really provides an opportunity for us to be able to educate our customers on physical identity access management, and for you guys to educate your customers a little bit about face authentication and biometrics and the things you can do there. And for our device, just a little plug on Alcatraz, right? So not only do we do face authentication, but we also do tailgate detection, and that's important, especially you were talking about these high security areas. you have people that are they're authenticated. They go to the door, they hold the door open for someone. It's almost never malicious. They're just trying to be polite, but that opens up a a vector for people to get into the facility that aren't supposed to. And so who's supposed to be going in, and when you have someone that isn't, being able to alert on that again really speaks to the nature of having the right people in the facility and being able to have that real time information about who's going through the doors, when they're going through, and if somebody doesn't get authenticated, being able to do something about that.
And that's a real time thing too. It's not even a security breach that you're reviewing logs and doing all that kind of thing. You're going, oh, someone got in here and we can see them here and they didn't badge there. It's like, bam, we got them because they went through, the device didn't recognize them, the door wasn't shut, all the things that you can detect from tailgating or anti-tailgating. And bingo, you've got that solution solved. And yeah, you're right. We do talk about physical access automation a lot to customers, and we answer RFPs in that area and sell in that area. But we always get asked too about how do we deal with anti-tailgating, how we deal with the highly secure areas that people want to get into. How can we secure those better? And data centers are a big, part of the world nowadays with artificial intelligence and all of the ones that are being built. And these all have high rigor around them. I mean, you've basically got this facility, it's got racks, and everyone's sharing these spaces, and so it's hard to manage. It's not a simple thing, and it can be done, but can it be done securely? Can it be done so you can be audited and clean and compliant? Can you ensure that you get customers in your data center because of the fact that you can guarantee them that other customers aren't able to access their rack? It's highly sensitive what's in those racks in many cases, and probably in all cases, to be honest. And there needs to be a way to guarantee the protection of those. And that's what we both bring to the table here.
Yeah. Another thing that came to mind, just speaking purely about data centers. So, I think we both have been around long enough to know that, systems like these traditionally always had to be on-premise type systems, but things are moving to the cloud. Our system is cloud native. We obviously can deploy on-prem. You guys are the same way. I'm kind of interested. How are you guys seeing the transition from on-premise to cloud, and how do you think that is kind of affecting adoption and so forth?
I think you and I probably had a beer about 5 years ago, and we're like, yeah, they're never going to get to the cloud. And that was on top of the one we had at 7 years and 9 years. And like, we never thought they were going to get there. This industry was really quite slow to get to the cloud, but it has like hyper accelerated that whole hockey curve. We're way up the J now. Like even utilities who are like no chance to go into the cloud, they're talking to us about, well, 2028, we're going to start talking about our strategy for the cloud. Like even institutions that you never would have said would go to the cloud, they're considering the cloud as well. And there's obviously, that's a whole nother topic of conversation, but I would say undoubtedly it has heavily moved that way. It's almost Pareto, where it was 80 on premise and 20 cloud. It's almost flipped over in that 5 years. And that's just like, that's no research behind that. That's just a gut feel from talking to people and answering RFPs. And the fact is, every single RFP we are asking, what's the cloud option at least? There's no doubt about it. So we too, like you, we hedged our bets and we waited for the cloud native timing. And we did that in the last few years. So we offer that.
Fantastic. Another question that we get a lot is handling the hybrid model and coming in and out and how you handle that. That you spoke to that a little bit, but that's a question we get is how do you handle these remote type people that don't come in and they have to do remote type of provisioning and so forth. That's where again I think our partnership really shines in that you can do the enrollment from your mobile device. And then obviously the provisioning is happening right inside of RightCrowd. When you're talking to a lot of your customers, are they concerned about the hybrid model and how people get provisioned and how does that work?
It's interesting. As an aside, I mean, the whole RTO thing it's definitely, ramping up much more than probably we all expected, to be honest. But there's still a lot of hybrid model out there. And at the end of the day, it's what we deal with in the vendor and visitor side of the house. Employees are pretty stable in their access in relative terms, but the vendor and the visitor are very opportunistic. It just, it happens all of a sudden, a new project, a new contract, a new visit, a new whatever. And the hybrid model is no different. We can get a notification from their space planning system that says, hey, Darren's coming to the office today, and we can provision that through and make sure they have access. And then they're going to an area where there's a rock or rocks, then we can make sure that they get that notification that says, hey, jump on here. If you're not already enrolled, because we can see that you're not, go and enroll yourself. And I mean, we should talk about that journey. That's the next thing I'd like to talk about, honestly, is what that journey really looks like between Right Crowd and Alcatraz from an organization perspective. But by doing that, then that hybrid model is basically giving them the capability that as they get into the office, they know when they get there, it's going to work. They're going to go like that in, and they're happy days. So, and I probably exaggerated that. You don't need to be quite as like that, but
It's even easier than that. And you know, you brought up a great point, right? So you show up at the office and you got to get through the front door. And so obviously most of those are outdoors. And so I think again, a nice thing is we just released our outdoor unit. We call it Rock X. So, you know, that's really appropriate for those type of scenarios where you know, the security office is inside, but you can show up, you're already registered, you can walk through the door. And the same applies, you were talking about contractors. You know, think about construction sites or places where it is temporary access and being able to do those things. You don't want to have to issue physical credentials necessarily to these people. And I think that's where we shine. You know, your face is your credential. And so you're not trying to issue these at all, right? They just show up and they don't need anything with them. And all the magic is kind of behind the scenes.
yeah. I mean, it's a, we see a lot of enterprise lobbies. It's Star Trek compared with what we see. And this is some of the biggest companies in the world. And you think, wow, you produce great, whatever. And this is how you run your lobby. Like it's still, clipboards and checks and balances and handing out badges. Like it takes a long time to process each visitor or each vendor or each employee or whatever. This is literally you as the vendor or the person who's hybrid worker, you just walk through that door. And it's a great point you raised, the outdoor reader. You told me about that probably 2 years ago, as being a gap, and then you guys filled it. I can see where that was a blocker, and you've solved that problem. So now they literally just turn up a facility. They're enrolled. They have a credential. It's right here. And they literally can just go through the door and they're compliant because we've made sure they're compliant. We've made sure they got all their training. We've made sure they got approvals. We've made sure all those things happen before your check actually works, because we'll turn off their physical access if they don't have it. So when they hit that rock, it won't do anything because you'll hit the physical security system as well and go, that because something's missing. So we'll make sure all of those checks and balances are done. And that just augments the whole experience because the organization is not at risk anymore. The person is not at risk either. Maybe they don't have training in a certain safety thing and they would have gone on site and injured or killed themselves or someone else. So, these are all important factors in large organizations that you just don't realize when you're not in that large organization every day. But we see those
Sure.
problems.
Yeah, I
So
think
let's
go ahead, go ahead.
there you go.
Uh,
That's a great
I was
point.
gonna say, you know, as in terms of like the lobbies, yeah, we see a lot of that. Just again, just the volume of people that are coming into these things, and it is oftentimes difficult for people to get signed up or to get through, and so we've optimized, you know, again on the user experience side to be able to mount our device in an aesthetic way. So you have these lobbies, right? And you're totally right. They're gorgeous, right? They're works of art from an architecture
Yes.
perspective, but
Yeah.
but but the management is not, and so, you know, it's so important that all these things kind of work together.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, all that money spent on making it look beautiful is a problem, because it doesn't work. So let's just talk through the user journey just to summarize that. Uh, when you've got both of us working together. So whether you're an employee and you're sitting in some HR system or a contractor management, you come through the contractor system or whatever, or a visitor who's been pre-registered through whatever means, all of those identities are sitting in Right Crowd. And we then make sure that we can identify based upon your profile and where you want to have physical access or where you should have physical access. We can identify very rapidly if you need biometric Alcatraz access through the rock. So we can make sure that we get that whole process started. Now that can be, as you said before, part of that compliance could be the consent. And whether we do the consent, which we did with one of our customers, or whether you do the consent, which you typically do as well, we can make sure that that consent process is a hard block. Until they've done that, they will not be enrolled. So you will have no breach of any privacy and other rules and everything else. To be enrolled, as you said, they literally will get a link. They'll tap on the link. It'll say, look at this, take a selfie, do this. Like it's, what is it? About 10, 15 seconds. I mean, I've done it a number of times and you're enrolled. I mean, that's it. That's all it takes. And that's the user experience. Then they hit the rock And the rock only opens if all of those checks and balances that RightCrowd's performed across all physical access rules and workflows and the systems themselves, it'll make sure that's the case. I mean, let me give you an example. We can make sure that if you turn up at that door, forget about training and everything else, if you just did a 16-hour shift and you haven't had an 8-hour break, and that's extreme, obviously, but if you haven't, we're not going to let you open the door because of the fact that you're going to breach some safety compliance issue. So you think about in an organization, what you do in terms of your policies versus the reality you're trying to manage those policies. Making sure that everyone's little white badge has the training on it. Are they fully trained? That's impossible. That has to be automated. And it's exactly the same here. I mean, there is no difference. When they turn up to the rock, we want to be checking all of those things behind the scenes. So, I mean, for me, that's the experience, including, let me reiterate, when their badge changes, we'll make sure that happens. We'll make sure that's updated for Alcatraz, so that's seamless. No one has any issues with a breakdown in access. We also will make sure when they're terminated or move off their role or lose access to those secure areas, we can take them out of the system as well. So it keeps it very, very clean. So I just want to basically, we've only got a few minutes left, I think, but some just things for the audience to really think about. And one of those is, what is your whole onboarding process? What is it to get someone into the system? How long does it take? What are the pain points? What's the user pain point? What's the administrator pain point? And we really would encourage people to think about that and document it properly and just map that against what the experience that we described today can truly be. So that's one of the things that I think is important for people to give consideration to, because that goes to the heart of what we're talking about today. One of the other ones that really comes in is really just around the auditing and tracking of events. What are you doing today to ensure that you can attest to who has been in that data center or who has been in that highly secure gold room or vault, training room floors, all the things that are the sensitive things that we manage or that you manage out there in the world. What are you doing to track that access, make sure there's no tailgating access, make sure that there's, how can you attest to the fact that this is all true and valid and compliant with all of the things that we're supposed to be compliant with? That's another thing that we often talk to customers about. And so that's the post-it notes all over the whiteboard thing. Like it's impossible to do manually. You have to automate these things.
Yep. And I think too, just to kind of put a fine point on that, you have the rules, right? And you mentioned the little white plastic card. That's the beauty of face authentication is you are the credential, right? So you can't, you can't lose your face. Your face can't be stolen. You don't forget your face at home, right? So you truly have a real record of who's going through and who's doing these things authenticated at the absolute highest level with the convenience of all of the automations that you just talked about.
I mean, you can't pick up a badge on the pavement that someone's dropped and get yourself in, because you can't pick up someone's face and just, spoof your way in. It's not possible. So yeah, it's a great point. Absolutely. And look, I think we're down to the last minute, but basically think about all the stakeholders this involves in an organization, the HR, the risk, the compliance. It's not just facility and security, it's the organization. We know HR want training to be in place before someone gets access to areas. Well, this is how you can mandate it, HR. This is how you can be sure at a physical access layer that you are getting that compliance and security that you really want to have. So really bring all those stakeholders together, and you'll find there are many incidents that they've had, and it'd be great to see those, to be honest, to understand what they were, where you've had big issues with access. So Blaine, I think we're run out of time. So I'd say thanks for your time today.
It's been a pleasure.